Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into one of the most influential spiritual texts in the world, the Bhagavad Gita. And what's so fascinating is that its core message isn't really about peaceful meditation. It's about finding clarity right in the middle of a massive, devastating crisis. And that crisis brings up a question that, we all face at some point. What do you do when your duty completely clashes with your heart? So the entire story kicks off not in some peaceful monastery and not with some abstract philosophical debate. No, it begins right here, boom, with a moment of just profound human crisis on the very brink of a terrible war. So let's talk about this warrior's moral crisis. To really get a handle on the Gita's timeless wisdom, we first have to understand the battlefield that's raging inside Arjuna himself. So the setting is this massive battlefield, Kurukshetra. And you've got two families of cousins, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, and they're about to fight a war for control of a kingdom. But this isn't just some conflict over territory. We're talking about a civil war, a family feud that has just spiraled completely out of control. The guys on the other side, they're not strangers, they're literally family. And here's what's so powerful. Arjuna, who is this incredible warrior, looks across the battlefield, and he sees his teachers, his grandfathers, his uncles, cousins, friends. And his crisis isn't about fear, not at all. It's about love. He looks at the opposing army and he doesn't see enemies, he sees the people he grew up with. He's just paralyzed by the thought that winning this war means destroying his entire world. So he lays down his weapons, he's completely broken, he's convinced that the sin of killing his own family is way worse than any victory. He turns to his charioteer, who happens to be his friend Krishna, and he basically asks, how can we ever be happy by killing our own people? What possible good can come from this? And that single question, that's the dilemma that the rest of the entire text is going to answer. All right, the soul is eternal. This brings us to Krishna's first and probably most fundamental teaching. This really forms the foundation of his entire philosophy. And honestly, it's a pretty radical shift in perspective. And Krishna's response is startling. Instead of offering some simple comfort, he immediately just reframes the entire problem. He tells Arjuna he's grieving for the wrong reasons, completely shifting the conversation from the personal to the universal. So here's the core distinction Krishna makes, and it's a big one. He basically says our identity is split into two parts. You've got the body, which is perishable, temporary, and subject to decay. And then you have the soul, our true self, which is eternal, indestructible, and it never, ever changes. So Krishna's point is that death, the thing Arjuna is so afraid of, is really just a transition for this indestructible soul. He says weapons can't cut it, fire can't burn it, water can't wet it, and the wind can't dry it. It's like changing your clothes. The body might pass away, but the essence of who a person is, their soul, that can't be touched. Okay, so if the soul is eternal, that's a really profound idea, right? But it brings up a huge question. How are we supposed to act in the world then? Well, this leads us to Krishna's super practical solution, the path of selfless action. Now, this is maybe the most famous concept to come out of the Gita, karma yoga. And it's not about doing nothing. It's about a totally new way of engaging in action. You could call it the spiritual discipline of selfless action, or maybe even the art of doing the right thing for the right reason, without getting tangled up in the outcome. So here's the practice. First, you identify your prescribed duty, your dharma. Then you perform that action with all your skill and all your focus. And here's the key. You renounce any claim to the results, whether they're good or bad. You just do the duty as an offering to the divine. So Krishna tells Arjuna, look, you have to fight, not for glory, not for yourself, but because it's your fundamental duty as a warrior to uphold justice. By focusing on the action itself and just letting go of the outcome, the actioning becomes pure. And this is such a revolutionary idea. It means that real spiritual practice isn't about, running away from the world to hide in a cave. It's about engaging with your responsibilities, your job, your family, your community, but doing it in this new, detached, and really mindful way. Okay, but let's be real. Why should someone act selflessly? What's the motivation? This is where Krishna starts to reveal this grand, cosmic perspective that pretty much changes everything. So Krishna starts to explain that the divine isn't some, distant being up in the sky. He says, no, it's present in the very essence of everything we experience. He says, I am the sweetness in water. I am the radiance in the sun and the moon. It's everywhere.
And that perspective just transforms the world, doesn't it? He says, I am the primordial syllable Om in the Vedas. I am virility in humans. Suddenly, every action, every object, every single person becomes a potential point of connection with a higher reality. It infuses even the most mundane, everyday parts of life with this incredible, profound meaning.
And get this divine order even influences our daily lives through these forces called the gunas, which are basically the fundamental qualities of nature. And you can see this in something as simple as our food. So sattvic, or pure foods, nourishing, sweet, pleasant things, they lead to health and happiness. Then you have rajasic, or passionate foods, like extremely bitter, salty, hot stuff. That can lead to misery and disease. And finally, tamasic, or ignorant foods, stale, decomposed, impure things, those result in lethargy and addiction. So these universal forces are just constantly at play, inside us and all around us.
All right, clarity on the battlefield. So, how do all of these big ideas, the eternal soul, selfless action, seeing the divine everywhere, how does it all come together to actually solve Arjuna's crisis? Well, this brings us to his final moment of clarity, right there on the field. So after listening to everything Krishna has said, Arjuna's entire perspective just shifts. He has this profound realization. He says, "Oh Krishna, out of compassion, you blessed me. My ignorance is dispelled by your words. All that doubt, all that grief, it's just burned away, and it's replaced by this deep understanding and a totally new resolve." So here's the big message of the Gita. By understanding our eternal nature and by performing our duties selflessly, we can find clarity and purpose even when we're facing life's most difficult conflicts. Arjuna is now ready to pick up his bow and fight. But he's not fighting with hatred. He's fighting with a clear mind. He finally understands his role in a much larger cosmic order, and he can fulfill his duty with this deep, profound sense of purpose. And that leaves us with a question that is just as powerful today as it was on that ancient battlefield. When your duty conflicts with your heart, where do you find clarity? The Gita seems to suggest that the answer isn't found by abandoning one for the other, but by totally transforming our understanding of action itself.